Welcome to the Daily Dose of B podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and I'm about to give you a window into the mind of yours truly. In a world where journaling is passé and self-awareness is deficient among us all, here's your Daily Dose of B. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Daily Dose of B podcast. I am going to start video recording my podcast, which means that we're going to have less of them. It's not going to be weekly, or it's not going to be daily. It's going to be more like weekly because I want to start adding them to YouTube. So that's where we're at right now. We are going to try a new thing because I've had some feedback from people saying that they think I'm more captivating when I'm saying the words out loud. So we're going to trust them on that because they're obviously the ones listening. So I'm still going to release this in audio form, and I will continue to release them in audio form as well. But I also want to start making a long form YouTube channel with these small podcasts and see if that helps gain traction or that's interesting. TBD. We're going to figure it out together. But for today's episode, I wanted to talk about something that I've heard a lot about and have personally experienced with, because in my life, I have definitely hurt my own feelings by creating fake stories to hurt myself, right? And I think a lot of women are guilty of this. If we're being honest with ourselves, we tend to do this thing where we catastrophize a potential situation and undersell a positive situation. Like if a guy in relationships, has his phone face down, there's this sort of idea like, oh, what is he hiding? And not like, oh, he's trying to focus on me and our conversation. So he's, trying to be away from his tech and not paying attention to his tech. I think we have a tendency as women, and maybe as people, to sort of assume the worst about each other. And I am someone who's really guilty of that. I had an experience recently where I'm not one of those like FBI agent girlfriends where you're like, start dating a girl and then she like knows all these things about your past history and like scrolled back 152 weeks on your Instagram and knows what high school you went to now. Like, I'm not someone who digs for dirt. And this is not to promote me as being a healthy person, but I just said that's never been my particular weakness. I've never been someone who's like, it'll really help me be in this relationship if I know what color polo he wore in 9th grade. I'm unconcerned with that. I'm more concerned with who you are right now. But I know a lot of women like that. And since I'm not a stalker, I have typically not been plagued with this whole, how do I compare to this person's exes, right? And a lot of women do this. And they say that attraction for women is mimetic, like as in we mime each other. So if we see another girl who's super attractive going for a particular guy, we're more likely to find him more attractive than we would if we had just seen him out without a girl, or if we had not peeked his Instagram and saw that he had some cute friends and thought, okay, if they see something in him, there must be something worth seeing. Women don't decide attraction solely based on what you look like in terms of sexual attractiveness. We base it off of a lot of things, and that's one of them. I would say that I don't go looking for that information. I kind of try to like get it out of the guy that I'm talking to. And I had a recent experience where I finally got to see what and you're gonna have to like deal with my washing machine in the background. Sorry, guys. I got to see someone's ex for the first time. And this is the story about how we catastrophize or create fake scenarios in our head, right? So I'm dating this guy who I think is like ideal. And I'm sure he's not everyone's ideal, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people who think this man is very weird. He definitely has like some very particular tastes. He's short. There's a lot of things that might make other women pass on him. So this is not to say I think he's like a god among men, because like we all know those types, like 6'2", abs, tons of money, Even though what's sad is like I have dated a millionaire with abs and it was not the best. So he's a deeply disturbed person. So I think also we just, again, we cook up the fantasy of what this will be like, and we don't interface with what the reality of this is. And so I had sort of created this false reality about this particular human's ex, because he spoke pretty highly of her, which is definitely a green flag. As a woman, you don't want to hear that some guy thinks that all of his exes were crazy, right? And this man in particular only had one real long-term relationship, so definitely like, okay, this ex is someone important because this is the only one who won in this game, right? And at least that's the way I was looking at it, because I thought that this person was like top tier man, and I still do in a lot of ways. He's a great person. But I think I kind of like ranked him above myself because of, and he kind of was part of that, right? He almost treated himself as though he was doing some like service to me by being in a relationship with me, which is kind of sad to admit to myself out loud, but that was kind of the vibe. And so I just had invented in my head that this ex-girlfriend must be like a dime, who was like super fit, best body ever, whatever. And I finally did some digging and found her, which again, a rarity for me. I'm not advocating for it. Okay, ladies, like relax. Don't get your llama drama. Don't feed your drama llama, but I do think that like for me, it was a necessary experience because, I needed a reality check about this human being. And I think that we can all sort of relate to this story because she ended up being just very ordinary. And there's nothing wrong with being ordinary. Like it's not to take anything away from her as a human. She's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with her, but she's ordinary in the way that I would consider myself very ordinary. And the story I had cooked up about her was that she was like, she must be this perfect person. And that was not only like unfair to suppose about my ex, right? That he has just all of this clout and can have these like super beautiful women just because my vision of who he was so clouded by my feelings that I wasn't really seeing him as like his true market value because I liked him so much. I wasn't able to be like, to extract myself from it and go, okay, like if you weren't looking for the exact things that he is and you are another woman that wasn't into his interests, it's almost like if I substituted his interests for like Marvel things, like he was really into Marvel, there'd be a lot of women that wouldn't be interested, right? Or like if he was a gamer or he's super into Dungeons and Dragons and that was his interest, there would be a lot of women that would not be interested in him, right? So he would not necessarily have the pull of super attractive women because he'd already stacked down his list by so many people by having these odd particular interests. He just happens to share these odd particular interests with me. So I was like, he's the king of this weird domain. But in reality, that didn't make him the king of like women in general. But I did have that feeling inside of me until I was able to reality check it against this actual other human being and be like, all right, he's just regular. And this was just a regular experience. I think that I have the tendency to do the black and white trauma thing of like either someone's great and they're like a fantasy person or they're like absolute trash. And I've learned over the last year of dating since my divorce that no one is, the manic pixie dream girl or the, werewolf vampire billionaire, whatever Jordan B. Peterson says. Like no one is exactly the thing that fits into the category, right? No one is exactly perfect or exactly horrible. Like it's always a mixed bag, right? I can look back on my relationship with my ex-husband and think to myself, there were so many wonderful things about him. There were so many things that made our relationship so great and easy. And I didn't give him that credit or give it that credit when I was leaving him because I kind of had to fill my head with these like traumatizing, he's evil, he's the worst, whatever thoughts. I wasn't able to get enough space to say like there were actually a lot of great things about that relationship. It doesn't mean that it was healthy. It doesn't mean that I could sustain keeping it together with his unhealthiness, but that doesn't mean that he is a trash human. And similarly, it doesn't make this other guy who dumped me, first time, guys, first time for everything, I was dumped. It doesn't make this other guy like an incredible, like, you know, knocking it out of the park, womanizing God among men, right? It doesn't have to be so stark in the differences. It can just be something as simple as everyone has good, everyone has bad, and what works for your life is what you need to be looking for. And so I kind of wanted to touch on not only like the comparison being the thief of joy, because I believe that that's super true when we are trying to say like, do I measure up? And that's in a negative or positive way. Like once we start to compare by like either putting someone down or lifting ourselves up, we're unable to feel joyful. Because like for me to think, oh, well, I'm prettier than his ex-girlfriend, that doesn't make me feel good because I'm putting down another human being. And I'm also, you know, dissolving this human down to being photos on social media. And that's not fair. But it's also like, even if I think I'm worse than someone, like I don't know their character. I don't know what they're about. I don't know their interests. And so like, that's what makes me unique and special and makes me someone that has something to offer a future partner. So that comparison really does steal the joy. And that also applies to comparing things to their ideal, right? So if I'm comparing, you know, this is the relationship that I have now with my ex-husband to like my ideal co-parenting relationship, it might not be the same. But that doesn't mean that our relationship is just not worth having or that it's the worst co-parenting relationship that it could exist. It's like, it's just not ideal, and you can't compare it to the ideal because that steals any joy you can get from it, right? So it's like, be happy in the good moments, even if you know like everything is a constant changing, evolving scenario. Be happy in the good moments. Be happy when it's working because it could not be working in the future and you will have missed out on those moments where it was good. And that's the way we can remove ourselves from this idealizing mentality. And then similarly, we can't compare a person to like the worst case scenario version of themselves. Like I can look at my most recent ex and say it ended amicably as it possibly could. He had nothing bad to say about me as a partner. It was just lifestyle differences. And like that's kind of as good as you can get. And instead of saying like, well, he could have been so much worse, so therefore he's a good guy. Like, no, it can still hurt, right? Like just because it could have been worse doesn't mean that it's great. It doesn't mean that it feels great. And you don't have to pretend like, well, let's compare it to the worst case scenario. And then we have to give this person all of this credit. Like at the end of the day, he still said no, thank you. And missed out on an opportunity to be with someone that really loved him for who he is. And that's an L. If you love yourself, that should be an L. Someone not choosing you should be an L because you should know the value that you bring a relationship. So it's like, I have to stay in the present moment and not try to find where something is the absolute worst or the absolute best and not compare things to what they could be, should be, maybe, might be, and instead just stay in the mindset of everyone is on their own journey. Everyone's trying to figure it out and we're doing the best that we can out here. And it's not easy to be a person. It's not easy to date. It's not easy to find a connection, but we can do a better job if we are staying reasonable with our expectations and we are not comparing. So that's your episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, whatever you're supposed to do on here. I don't know. I'm new to the being on video thing. So let me know what you think.
Thanks for listening to my podcast, Daily Dose of B. I really hope you liked it. If you did, leave me a 5-star review. You know the drill. It'll help bump me in the algos, and I will love you forever. Have a great one.